This is the Beer Bat Podcast. Today we have no John. Not sure what exactly is going on, but we will continue with the show. This is your first time tuning in. My name is Parker Brown. Let me move this camera a little bit. A little unprofessional right now, but we're chilling. If this is your first time tuning in, Beer Bat Podcast. It's a podcast all about the Tigers and the grander MLB, and essentially we will be talking today. Let me grab my notes out. Yeah, I'm very unprepared right now. Sorry about that. Obviously, the Royals and the Tigers. Tigers will win the series against the Royals today. I believe it was a 3-2 game. Spencer Torkelson having a great series against the Royals. I mean, there's not much to complain about there. I'm gonna plug. Not hearing anything. But continuing on, it's man, I feel louder now. But continuing on, definitely a great series for the Tigers. It wasn't fun to have a game go to 11-10, but Spencer Torkelson, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs. I mean, what a stellar game from him. There's a lot going on. I was about to say something. Trade deadline's coming up, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But starting off, Tigers lose the first game against the Royals, 11-10. They go on to get, like I said, Spencer Torkelson, great game. Following game, they go. What was I going to say? They win the second game and they win the third game to win the series. Today was a getaway day. Michael Lorenzen they shut out the Royals today. Great game for them. Not much really else to talk about. Riley Green looking like himself again. He had a solid game today. Let's look up his stats. Riley Green, doing this on the fly, guys. Today, but we do have a whole new setup. I got a new webcam today. We are having some fun. I got a new keyboard. Got a nice new setup. No beer today. I think I'm gonna skip the beer review for today. But be sure to let your family, friends, and loved ones know about the Beer Bat Podcast. As I'm still struggling to find his freaking stats from the other day. Max Clark. We talked about him with Brady last week. Great pick. I think he could definitely help change a franchise like the Tigers. I think one of the first high school players we have selected in a couple years. But let's go. I got the stats pulled up finally. Computer's slow. And where did the stats go? Here we go. 3-0. Going to it. Yeah. I mean, Tigers are at this point probably not winning the AL Central, as Cleveland has kind of started to take that away. Riley Green today, 1 for 3. Zach McKinstry also 1 for 3. Spencer Torkelson, off night for him, 0 for 3. Kerry Carpenter, also another off night. Nick Maton, 1 for 4. 2 for 4 for Andy Ibanez. That's a guy I think that is going to be. I'd be surprised if he's not someone that we trade at the deadline. But who knows? It's all in Scott Harris's hands now. But at this point, sorry about this. I'm texting. But Tigers definitely. It's halfway through the season, and I think at this point we should think potentially of selling at the deadline, I'd say. Get rid of a lot of players that I don't think are going to be on the timeline coming forward. We talk about Eduardo Rodriguez a lot. I think that's a guy that will probably be at the top of our priority to trade. Let me go turn this light on. There you go. Now you can see my face better. But like I said, also Andy Ibanez, don't be surprised if he's gone at the end of the season. Another guy, Kerry Carpenter, there is a definitely possibility of us trading him. Tigers trade. Yeah, I mean, Padres GM when the Tigers trade for Juan Soto. I mean, this is a funny clip. I would pull it up if I had the second, but who knows? It should be fun. But John will be joining us in about 5 minutes here. I'm not going to be struggling on my own. I definitely one of the hardest things to do for podcasting is doing this on your own. Not a lot of people can do this on their own, and I'm really trying hard to learn how to do this on my own. I had to do this one time before doing foam finger. So that was an old podcast I did with a friend of mine in college. Sometimes he wasn't available, so I would have to step up and do it on my own. But continuing on with our topics, yeah, definitely the Tigers not going to be buying. They're not. They're in no position right now. I did talk about Max Clark for a second. Max Clark, high school from Franklin, Indiana. A lot of rave around him. There is a lot of questions. A lot of people are iffy about it. Shout out to all the people that saw that clip I posted on TikTok. It was an interesting. I was kind of surprised that Max Clark has the following he does. So, I mean, maybe this is a guy that sells tickets. I think Riley Green and him are going to be filthy in the outfield. What was I going to say? Losing my train of thought right now. But yeah, who knows? I feel like there's a chance that Max Clark does make an impact. He's definitely we're not gonna see him for a few years. He's gonna come up and definitely he's gonna work his way through the minor leagues. I will be surprised if he's up in the major leagues in 2 years. I think he's gonna be like a 3-year plus guy. Man, this is hard. I feel like I'm just talking to myself right now. But shout out to the heavyweights. I was on their show today. Man, I have no organization right now, even though I wrote a rundown. Bear with me. I might not even hear this episode. Fuck. Here, we're gonna come back. I'm gonna go to a break. We're gonna come back, talk some more Tigers, and I will be back. Be sure to stay tuned. And we are back. Looks like I'm getting my computer's lagging a little bit behind. But John, welcome to the show. I was a little stranded without you. But
right.
we are back. This is the Beer Bet podcast. John, how are you doing today?
Not bad. Kind of been running around with my head cut off, but we got the Motor City Metrics podcast at 9:00 after this. So we're going to get warmed up and talk a little baseball and, get those creative juices flowing a little bit.
Yeah, this is just your warm-up round.
Oh,
But
I don't know. I would say that.
No, you're not warming up right now? You're not warming up them vocal cords for Motor City Metrics?
I'm always warmed up.
Always warmed up? No practice.
Yes.
But we started the show talking about the Tigers losing their first game to the Royals, and then eventually winning the series today, winning the game 3-0. Spencer Torkelson having a little bit of spark that first game against the Royals, hitting 2 home runs and 5 RBIs. I didn't really get into this, but if the Tigers are buyers or sellers at the trade deadline, and I talked a little bit about Max Clark, but getting right into it, are the Tigers buyers or sellers at the trade deadline, and why?
Sellers, because they're not good enough to win the division this year. And even if they do somehow manage to win a division, I don't think they're going to make much noise in the playoffs. They are 5 games out of the division right now. They're 44-52. Really good 3-game set against the Royals, which honestly they should have swept that series.
Yes, they absolutely should have.
Yeah, that loss where they scored 10 runs and still lost was very, very upsetting. But I think you have to be sellers. And I talked about this on a previous pod about just having the goal of winning a World Series, the goal of just making the playoffs. You have to have a long-term goal in place. We saw that with the drafting of Max Clark. He's a guy that's going to be here for the long term. And I think a guy like Eduardo Rodriguez needs to be traded. Any veterans that you have, even guys that are under contract for multiple years, like an Alex Langer, Jason Foley, even Zach McKinstry, I think all need to be moved as well. Tarek Skubal is a guy I think maybe you could be looked at to be moved in the offseason. I know he has a lot of years of control left, but when you look at what Al Avila did wrong, it was holding on to guys for way too long, whether that was Michael Fulmer or Matt Boyd. These guys, he was asking for a king's ransom and he never got it because he just overvalued these guys. I look at a guy like Tarek Skubal, if he's able to have a good end to the year, and he's a guy you could maybe look to move in the offseason. But in terms of being buyers or sellers, I'm not saying they can't. I'm not saying they could be both in terms of maybe they sell off a player, but then they identify a young, controllable player that they can stick in their lineup right now. But I would definitely say they need to be building for the future at the trade deadline.
Yeah, and I think that's a case. I know a lot of fans are really begging for Shohei Ohtani right now, which it's not going to happen.
To the Tigers?
Yeah.
Okay, come on. What were the Tigers?
Nobody's being realistic right now.
So what would the Tigers realistically like? Let's just play this out. What would you even give up?
Okay. Max Clark.
You'd give up Max Clark for Shohei for 2 months of Shohei Ohtani.
That's what the Angels would probably want.
Even if the Tigers get Shohei Ohtani, are they the best team in the AL Central?
No. Yeah, I'd say yeah. I'd say they are.
Maybe.
I mean, it's just throw away everything Scott Harris just built, and it doesn't make any sense. But
no, I don't even want to talk about it. That's not happening.
Don't even entertain it.
Yeah, I'm not even entertaining.
But if they were to be buyers, what do you think they're going for? Hitting, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think they need offense. I think their rotation is really solid, in my opinion. Eduardo Rodriguez, who is an all-star. He wasn't technically an all-star, but he's performed like one. Michael Lorenzen, who has not given up an earned run in the month of July, which is crazy because a lot of people kind of clowned him for being picked as an all-star, but he's been absolutely fantastic as of late. He's a guy that they should sell at the deadline, and I think they can get something for Michael Lorenzen. I'm not saying they're going to get a team's top 5 prospect, but could they get a team's top 10 prospect in a team's organization for Michael Lorenzen? I think there's a possibility. But you've got those two veterans. You obviously have Skubal and Manning, who have shown flashes. Skubal had a rough start against the Royals, but has looked good in his other starts. You have Reese Olson as well. You have Bo Brisky, who just came back. So if there was a weakness for this team, it would be another middle of the order bat. I just don't know if that bat is going to be on the market and if the Tigers are going to be willing to part ways with some of their prospects to get a bat. But I would definitely say they need a middle of the order impact bat to really push this team over the edge to try to contend for the AL Central.
So going into our next segment, obviously we love talking grander MLB. So the Orioles, this is kind of a big story. The Orioles take the lead over the Tampa Bay Rays. Does that push them over the edge? Do you think that will kind of give them a shot to make a large run in the playoffs? Do you think that what we're seeing is going to, do you think, let me put this in better words. Do you think what we're seeing now is what we're going to see in the playoffs is what I essentially am trying to say?
I like Baltimore, and I do think that it's important to win your division because how the playoffs are structured, two top teams record-wise get a bye into the first round, which is important. You don't want to be playing in that wild card series, the best of 3 game set. Anything can happen. So, yes, winning the division is very, very important for the Baltimore Orioles. But in terms of them in the playoffs, I just don't know if they have the starting pitching necessary. Now, we have seen this before, like a team like the Kansas City Royals who won the World Series. They didn't have, frontline Cy Young level starters, but they had a great offense. They were great defensively, and they had a really, really good bullpen with Wade Davis, Greg Holland. There was one other hard throwing reliever they had, but that's how they were able to win the World Series through their bullpen and through their offense, not so much pitching wise. So we always say starting pitching is what wins. That's been the case throughout MLB history, but that could change. It's definitely been done before. A team not having a strong rotation still able to go deep into the playoffs and win the World Series. But I look at the Baltimore Orioles starting rotation, Kyle Gibson, Tyler Wells, Kyle Bradish, just not really front of the rotation guys and guys you can really rely on to give you 5 or 6 good innings in a playoff game. So that would be my hesitance on them, as well as they're just still so young. They have no real playoff experience on that team. So for them, I think just getting to the playoffs, no matter what happens, to me, is if they just make the playoffs, which they will, then their season has been a success because I don't think anybody saw them. I mean, they're on like a 90-win pace at this point. So to me, their season is a success as long as they make the playoffs.
So do you think since the Rays are now the second place team, do you think that affects them at all? Especially with their extremely hot start to the season.
I mean, yeah, like I said, you don't want to play in that wild card series. I mean, the Rays do have the starting pitching. They're going to have Shane McClanahan starting game 1. They'll have Glass now probably starting game 2. But yeah, that wild card series is just so unpredictable, and you just want to avoid that at all costs. So I think the importance of winning the division with these new playoff format is important. But I think Tampa is a better team than Baltimore. I think if you put both of these teams up against each other in a best of 7, I think I would take the Tampa Bay Rays just because I trust their starting pitching more. They obviously have a lot of playoff experience on that roster with guys like Randy Arozarena and Yandy Diaz, Brandon Lau, who all played in the World Series. You have the emergence of guys like Luke Raley, Wander Franco. So I would still say Tampa is the best team in that division. They're going through a little bit of a cold stretch right now. They're still my pick to probably win that division. But yeah, absolutely. They want to do everything in their power to avoid that wild card series because in a 3-game series, you just never know what's going to happen.
So the last topic of the second segment, because I have a lot for the third segment of the show. Angels sweep the Yankees and are now at 500. Are they making a push for the playoffs? And do you think if they make it to the playoff, or do you think if they are much more above 500 than they are, do you think Shohei Ohtani is even in the question of being traded?
I think they're at the point where they should just trade him no matter what. I mean, unless they go on some ridiculous run. They're sitting at around 500 right now. They're 1 game over 500. They are 4.5 games out of the last wild card spot, but you have to think They're behind teams like the Yankees, like the Red Sox. There's a couple teams they're going to have to jump to get into that position. So it'll be very, very interesting to see because they do have talent on that roster. They've obviously dealt with injuries. They could be a team that can go trade for a starting pitcher. There's going to be a lot of starting pitchers, it looks like, on the market with the Chicago White Sox. So they're probably going to trade Giolito, maybe entertain trading Dylan Cease. The Tigers have some starting pitchers that could be traded as well. It'll be really interesting to see. And it's really unfortunate. I think we talked about this. I think both of us want him to stay on the Angels and win a World Series with the Angels. But yeah, I think we'll know in the next week what they're going to do. They have to have a strong week. And if they're sitting there a couple days out of the trade deadline and they're a game or two out of the wild card, then absolutely you don't trade them. But I think it's really going to depend on this next week. And if they struggle and they're sitting there 6 or 7 games out and they got 3 or 4 teams ahead of them for that last wild card spot, I think they're going to have to make a tough decision. But I think it's going to be like on a whim, honestly. Like I still think they're very open. I don't think they're have a mindset of like we're trading them. I don't think they know yet because, like you said, they're at 500 and they have talent. It's just I think it's really just going to depend on this next week for them.
But we mentioned you mentioned Dylan Cease. Dylan Cease has a few destinations that are being packaged towards him. The most popular one is Dylan Cease to the Astros. But I'm also seeing the Braves and the Cubs be a perfect destination for him. Yankees could even be a destination for him. Where do you realistically think he could end up by the trade deadline?
I'm not sure if he's going to be. I think Lucas Giolito will be traded. I'm pretty confident in that. Dylan Cease, I think there's a decent chance. I'd say it's probably 60, 70% chance Dylan Cease gets traded. I really like the Astros just because they lost Verlander in the offseason. They lost Lance McCullers to injury. They really need a frontline starter. But the Astros just don't really have a great farm system, so I don't know what they're going to be able to give up. The Yankees, I think, are a destination as well. I mean, there's so many suitors for Dylan Cease because he's not a rental. He's going to be under contract for multiple years. So pretty much any team that's planning to contend this year or in the next couple years, I think is a destination for him. I think Baltimore, it could be really interesting as well. I mean, so many teams that could be. I mean, Atlanta. I mean, if they get Dylan Cease, that's just ridiculous. As good as that team already is. But yeah, I think the White Sox are going to be one of the most interesting teams to watch at the deadline. And another thing I wanted to bring up, because you did mention the Astros, I just saw a report from MLB Network. It says the Astros and the Rays are eyeing Michael Lorenzen. So that
Really?
I think yes. So I think that's interesting. I think he fits well on both of those teams. So yeah, that could be another destination. But I do think the Astros are going to get a starting pitcher at the deadline. Whether it's Michael Lorenzen or whether they want to give up a lot for a guy like Dylan Cease or maybe Eduardo Rodriguez.
Going in, so this whole third section of the show is called buying and selling. I made this up on the whim. Basically, I'm going to give you a prompt and you are going to say you're buying it or you're selling it, meaning like, yes, I'm like buying would mean, yes, I approve it. Like I'm all for it. Selling means no. Like, I'm not for it. Get that out of my sight. Throw it in the trash. All right. So the first one is Shohei Ohtani will be traded for a Juan Soto-sized deal at the deadline.
I'm buying it. I think he brings back more than Juan Soto. But yeah, that's what it's going to take to get him. I do think he will be traded at the end of the day. I mean, I can't say that confidently because we just don't know. It's baseball. If the Angels have a good week, then they're going to talk themselves into being able to compete. But yeah, in terms of what they could get for him, I think it's pretty close to what they could get for what the Padres gave up for Juan Soto, which is crazy because Juan Soto wasn't a rental. Shohei Ohtani is a rental, but I think that just shows how good he is. He is the best player in baseball, and I don't even think it's necessarily close. They should get an absolute haul for him, which is crazy to think about because they're going to get a haul for him no matter what. But I still think at the end of the day, no matter what trade they make, they're going to lose that trade. Because when you're trading a guy like Shohei Ohtani, you're just worse off no matter what you get. I mean, you could get a team's top 5 prospects. So like you look at an example like the Cincinnati Reds, they could give the Angels their top 5 prospects, which that's a very good farm system. There's some really good prospects that the Reds have in their top 5. I still think the Angels lose that trade because at the end of the day, you're trading arguably the greatest baseball player of all time. And even though it's for 2 months of the year, that's going to be a hard pill to swallow because at the end of the day, if they're trading him at the deadline, that probably means that he's not coming back. I don't see the Angels trading Shohei Ohtani and then re-signing him in the offseason. So that would be a tough pill to swallow for Angels fans and really unfortunate to think of. They had Trout and Ohtani in their prime for multiple years and weren't even able to have a winning season is very disappointing.
So my next, well, and I also am buying on that situation. I think Shohei Ohtani, I think if the Angels want to succeed in the future, they need to trade him. I think, because if you don't trade him, you're probably losing him for nothing. I don't think in any sort of way Shohei Ohtani will be returning to the Angels next year. So yeah, I'm definitely buying that. But who knows? The next one is Alex Lang is on another team by the end of the trade deadline.
I'm going to say probably not. He struggled down the stretch. Yeah, I'm selling because he struggled down the stretch with his control. He still has so many years left of control. Still relatively young. I believe he's 27 years old. So the Tigers are going to have more opportunities to trade him. And let's say the Tigers keep him and he has a strong second half. He's a prime guy to be traded in the offseason. But I just think, if he didn't go through this rough stretch, then I think it's a good chance he's getting traded. But, at the end of the day, you want to trade a guy when he's at his peak value. And I don't think Alex Lange is necessarily at his peak value right now. And because he's still so young and has so many years left to control, I'm predicting he will still be a Tiger past the trade deadline.
I think there's other pitchers. I'm also selling. I think there's also other pitchers that the Tigers will be willing to trade more than Alex Lang. I think Alex Lang is going to be here for a good while. I would be surprised if he's gone. But yeah, I think Michael Lorenzen would be a guy that's probably gone, like you mentioned, Rays and Astros. I think Tarek Skubal, there's a chance. I think Tarek Skubal is going to stay on this team. I believe. But getting into the next one, this is kind of a fun one. Not a fun one for Javier Baez though. Tigers get an upgrade at shortstop at the deadline. Buying or selling?
Selling, because who would realistically, like, Javier Baez has been awful, but I still think there's talent there. We've seen he can go on a hot stretch. So if you can name me a shortstop on another team that's going to get traded, then maybe. But I think they're gonna just stick it out with Javier Baez. We've already seen them play McKinstry at shortstop. If it gets to the point where Javier Baez is that bad, then they can just play McKinstry. But the Tigers, I don't think they're going to be competing. Maybe if they could do a prospect for prospect trade, or maybe they get like a young shortstop in a Michael Lorenzen or Eduardo Rodriguez deal that could impact the Tigers this year and play some shortstop. But I don't think there's necessarily an upgrade over Javier Baez. And I think the unfortunate truth is we're probably stuck with him. Maybe the Tigers just, cut ties with him and buy out his contract. Maybe there's a trade down the line, but I think right now we're kind of stuck with him playing shortstop for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping maybe we could find someone, but I don't think there's a chance. Second to last buying or selling for me, and I'll pass the torch to you if you have any prompts that you would like to say. The Padres are sellers at the deadline.
Oh boy, that's crazy to think about. So let's look at who they could sell. So I'm pulling up their roster right now. Joe Musgrove, Blake Snell is a big topic because he will be a free agent after this year. He's been fantastic. He had a rough start to the season, but he has been absolutely lights out. So I think Blake Snell is a prime trade candidate for the Padres if they really don't believe that they can make a run in the playoffs. But if you're just looking, you have Bogarts, Machado, Tatis. and Juan Soto, I mean, you've got to believe that you're in it. And you have Snell, you have Joe Musgrove, you have Yu Darvish. So, I mean, them being sellers would be absolutely wild to think about. But I do think if there was one guy that they would sell, it would be Blake Snell. Um, yeah, I don't really know anybody else on the roster that could be traded. They just gave Darvish an extension, so I don't think he's going anywhere. Maybe there's a couple relievers they could look to move, but I mean, for all the money they've spent, for all the prospects that they've traded, for them to sell at the deadline, I mean, if you think about it, last year they were 2 wins away from the World Series, and for them to sell at the deadline just a year later and basically wave the white flag is pretty disappointing, and I think they have to be on the list, maybe even at the top of the list, other than the New York Mets as the most disappointing team in the MLB. So I don't think they're going to sell, but it would definitely be wild if they were to sell at the deadline. Oh, you're muted, Parker. We're having some technical difficulties here, but yeah, Padres have been really disappointing, and it's crazy to think about because of all the talent they've had, everything they gave up for Juan Soto, and I
Are we
think
good?
Parker. Yeah, we're good.
Yes, where we go. I clicked it and it just like sent me to my launch pad. So I was like, okay. But I think like you said, they're definitely going to be a disappointing team if they sell. I think they're a disappointing team regardless of what they do. Man, you can just not see me at all.
Yeah,
But when I bring you this next prompt, I'm going to go shut my blinds and see if that helps. But I mean, this team has been so disappointing. Juan Soto, Fernando Tatis Jr., and Manny Machado, who is a MVP candidate last year, cannot get it done. And that's saying that's kind of scary. And you got Josh Hader, who's easily one of the best closers in the MLB. If you can't get it done, then I mean, I don't think their record's that good either. I don't think they're going to be making the playoffs this year. So,
yeah.
but it's a disappointing year.
So yeah, they are 46-51 right now, 4th place in the NL West, 10 games out of first place. It's going to be an uphill battle for them, but they're a team they could win 7 out of 9 games, and they're right there back at or above 500. But I mean, yeah, to your point, I think that shows that like for me in the MLB is not a star-driven league. I think the NBA is a star-driven league. You get a star, you have 2 stars, you're a playoff team. It's not that way in the MLB, and we're seeing that. We've seen that with the Angels, where they have the 2 best players in baseball can't finish at or above 500. And now we're seeing that with the Padres, where you have 2 MVP candidates in Juan Soto and Fernando Tatis, another guy in Manny Machado, who is probably the next step under that. Even Xander Bogaerts, who was one of the best shortstops in baseball, gave him a huge contract. And that's not even to mention Blake Snell, who is a former Cy Young. Yu Darvish has been in Cy Young contention for the majority of his career. Joe Musgrove and Josh Hader. Like, it just shows the MLB is a team sport. You need to have a complete rotation. You need to have a complete lineup. I mean, other than those 4 stars in that lineup, they really have no depth whatsoever. They were giving at-bats to Nelson Cruz, and that didn't work out. They just have a lack of depth in their starting rotation, pitching-wise, and in their lineup, which is crazy to think about. And it just really reminds you that, you know, the MLB, it's a team sport. I know people say football is a team sport. I would say the same thing about baseball.
Totally. And I have one more prompt, and I'll let you have a little bit of fun and say a couple for you. But my last one is Corbin Burns will not be a Brewer by the trade deadline.
So the Brewers are 54-43 right now. They're 8-2 in their last 10. And no offense to the NL Central, but it's awful. The Pirates were leading the NL Central for most of the year. They're now in last place. The Cardinals look like they're going to sell. They have won 5 in a row, so that Cardinal magic, it might be starting to pick up, but they're still 10.5 games out of first place, 10 games under 500. The Cubs, 5 games under 500. They've really struggled to really find sustained success. I think the Cubs are probably a seller at the deadline. And then you have the Cincinnati Reds, who are a great story, but have kind of come back down to earth a little bit. And I do think they had a lot of young players kind of playing over their heads. So I do think the Brewers are the favorite to win that division, but that hasn't stopped them from trading one of their best players. They traded Josh Hader at last year's deadline. Even though they were in contention for the NL Central, they still moved on from Josh Hader. But I think Corbin Burns, I believe he'll be a free agent after next year. It's either after next year or the year after that. So they still have a little bit of control with him. He hasn't had the greatest season compared to his Cy Young year in 2021. So I think they hold on to him. And I think the Brewers, they need to get some help for their offense. I think Christian Yelich has been a lot better. Now, he hasn't been the MVP that he once was, but he's been an all-star level player for them. I think they need another impact bat in their lineup. But I do think, if I had to make a prediction, I do think the Brewers will win the NL Central, and I think they will keep Corbin Burns to make a run at a World Series.
And who knows? I mean, like you said, that division is terrible. So if they want to, I believe aren't the Brewers are first place, correct?
Yes, they are.
I mean, I was hoping if they were 53 and 40 something, but yeah, I mean, I can see it happening just because they traded Josh Hader last year, but who knows? I that was kind of a question. It's like, ooh, I think there's definitely potential for it. I mean, if I look it up online right now, let's look. Corbin Burns trades.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like destinations, I mean, mostly the same teams that would be interested in like Dylan Cease and Lucas Giolito. So like we talked about teams like the Astros, the Baltimore Orioles, teams like that. But I haven't really heard any Corbin Burns trade rumors.
I haven't, but
yeah.
I've seen some stuff on like Instagram. But yeah, the Astros are definitely like a candidate to get him. But yeah, that's all the stuff for buying and selling I got. So I'm gonna let you throw some questions out there.
Oof, I'm gonna come up with some of these on the spot. Oh,
hey, it's all good.
What do the Cardinals do at the trade deadline? Is there a name, a player, a group of players that get traded? What do you think the Cardinals do now that they're 10 games under 500? They have I don't think in my lifetime they've ever sold at the trade deadline, but they might this year. So what do you think they're going to do at the deadline?
I definitely think that they're trading Nolan Arenado. I don't see him having a future on that Cardinals team. He does. I mean, he's said it before where, I mean, he's just not having success on the team. I remember there's a mic'd up moment where they were like, "Hey, can I get a jersey swap?" And he goes, "Yeah, you can take this jersey because we ain't winning in this thing." And I think the writing's in the air for it. I don't really know exactly where he could end up. But I do think Nolan Arenado, I mean, he's the best player on that team right now. And I think the Cardinals have been extremely disappointing this year. Cardinals set record straight on club's trade plans for Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. Yankees are rumored to be interested in Nolan Arenado right now. Poor guy will have to shave his nice beard that he has right now. But I think the Cardinals are easily one of the most disappointing teams this year. Not as disappointing as like the Mets, but you go from having the MVP to just kind of being a nobody. But yeah, the Yankees are reportedly linked to Cardinals superstar and potential trade and deadline deal.
Yeah, that would be an interesting fit for the Yankees. Yeah, and I think Jack Flaherty, who I believe is a free agent after this year, he could maybe be moved. Jordan Montgomery is another guy. But yeah, in terms of like most disappointing teams, I think you'd have to go probably Padres, Cardinals, and Mets. Because to me, I thought the Cardinals won the NL Central last year, and then you go add a guy like Wilson Contreras. To me, I had expectations for them to compete for a World Series. So it's been very disappointing to see the season they've had, but not really, because I mean they're the Cardinals. They beat us in the 06 World Series. They got a title in 2011. They got a title as well. So it's like they've had their success. I'm not upset the Cardinals are not going to make the playoffs. whatever. I don't care. But in terms of another team, if we go to the American League Central, I think the White Sox, Tigers, and Royals are probably going to be sellers. I look at the two teams that are around 500 right now, and the Twins and the Guardians. What do you think they could do at the deadline? Are they going to? I don't think they can sell because they're in contention for this division. So there's no way those teams sell. So what do you think they do? Is there a position of need for them for the two teams fighting for the American League Central?
Twins definitely shortstop. I think you have to. I don't. Carlos Correa has just not. I mean, he's close to being as bad as Javi Baez is. I mean not clearly not as bad, but I mean they just extended him, knowing that he did not want to be a part of that team. So it's tough to say. I'm gonna be honest with you, I haven't really followed the Guardians a lot this season, so I don't really know what their needs are. I know there's been talks about getting rid of Shane Bieber. I mean, there's definitely a chance that happens, but I mean, like you said, if you're contending for the division, you should be buying right now. You should be finding the players that you can get right now, like a Nolan Arenado, to help your team.
Yeah, I think the Guardians definitely need a bat. And talking about this, I really can't think of any, are there any offensive players? We've mentioned Nolan Arenado. I feel like there's mostly just starting pitchers that we've mentioned as traded. Who are the bats that are going to be available? Because I'm thinking the Tigers, they don't really have that many guys offensively. Like Tim Anderson, I think he could maybe be traded, but he's had an awful year. So it's like,
Cody Bellinger.
Dude, I was looking at Cody Bellinger's numbers. I am so happy that he's having a good year because, I mean, to see him win the MVP in 2019, I believe he hit 47 home runs, and it's just kind of been all downhill from there. To see him kind of bounce back is great to see. But, yeah, I mean, he's a guy you could put in the middle of almost any lineup. Cody Bellinger on the Guardians, I mean, they need power. They need a guy who can drive in runs and hit home runs. He's a perfect fit for the Guardians. I mean, he could be a guy that the Twins are interested in. But yeah, other than Cody Bellinger, was there any other names? Because to me, the Guardians, they just need offense. They need guys who can hit home runs. So any home run, like a home run hitter or a power guy that they can put in their lineup, to me, that's what the Guardians should target at the deadline.
Brian Reynolds, that's a name. Herman Marquez, that's a pitcher, so that won't work. If I can keep scrolling down. Christian Walker of the Diamondbacks.
No, why would I mean the Diamondbacks are competing though? I don't know why they would trade Christian Walker. I mean, there's just not a lot of.
It's a lot of pitchers I'm seeing.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed. Look,
Jonathan Scope, get him out of here.
He's already Tigers DFA'd him. So
oh really?
If any team wants to pick him up, I mean, they will. But Jeimer Candelario, and I mean, I've been keeping up with Jeimer Candelario, and then honestly, it's pretty upsetting to see the season that he's had. He has 15 home runs, which would lead the Tigers. His OPS is over 800. I'm pretty upset by that because I wanted to bring him back and to see what Nick Maton has done. I mean, I'm not saying the Tigers would be winning the Central, but if they had Jeimer Candelario in their middle of their lineup, they're closer to 500. So I think, not bringing him back was pretty upsetting. But he's a guy I think the Nationals are going to trade him because he's an expiring contract. So any team that needs a third baseman or he can maybe play some first base or DH, I think Jeimer Candelario is a fit on any team that needs some offense.
I remember, so when I worked for the Tigers, but I met his mom, and she doesn't speak English at all, but one of the sweetest people I've ever met. I mean, Jeimer Candelario, that whole family would treat the staff so well. I mean, that's a dude that I think any franchise would want just because of his attitude. So, yeah, I mean, it definitely is upsetting to see that he's having a great season with the Nationals, but good for him, honestly. Get him out of the system that really wasn't helping him at all, and he's now prospering in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just being a selfish Tigers fan, but I mean,
totally.
yeah,
that's allowed.
Yeah, but I think to me, the Guardians, they have the pitching. Their pitching is good enough to win that division. I just think their offense, unless a player gets hot like an Andres Gimenez or Ahmed Rosario, I think they need another middle of the order bat, and I think Jamer Candelario or Cody Bellinger could be a perfect fit for them as well. But I mean, yeah, those were the two questions I had. I mean, we've kind of gone over every other team. I mean, the Seattle Mariners, do you think they do anything? They're a team to me that is probably just going to stand pat. I mean, what could the Mariners even do at the deadline?
Trade for Shohei Ohtani.
I mean, I've thought about it. To me, it's the only reason they would trade for him is if they have plans to re-sign him. If they want to re-sign him in the offseason, then I say go for it because their offense has been pretty dreadful. Like Jared Kelenic got off to a great start, has kind of fallen off the wagon a little bit. Julio Rodriguez, I know he was an all-star, really hasn't played like it. So, yeah, their offense has been pretty dreadful. They need that guy that can carry that offense, that they can rely on every night. I mean, their pitching is fantastic. If they add Ohtani to that, it just gets even better. But to me, if they want to re-sign him, I think Seattle is a perfect fit for Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Blue Jays, I think that could be a destination for Shohei. I'm trying to think what else. San Francisco, Yankees.
Ooh. Let's talk about the Giants. I love the Giants to me are such a fun team. But I mean that just was you just brought that up. But when we're looking at the Mariners because we were talking about them and their farm system, I'll be honest, it's not that great. So I don't know if they're gonna have the prospects to trade for Shohei Ohtani. But yeah, I mean the Giants. I mean, possibly they look like they're a playoff team. Ohtani, and I mean they're in a pretty big market, so they could re-sign him. It'll be very interesting to see.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but I love the Giants. I mean,
yeah, me too. They're such a fun team. Like just coming out of nowhere, it's just been really fun to see.
Yeah, and I think I just kind of I don't know. There's just something about the San Francisco Giants I've kind of always liked. I don't know if it's just with their franchise or not. But I think if any team is going to get Shohei Ohtani, I think it's the Giants.
Really? So what would they – because I'm looking at their prospects. Kyle Harrison is one of the better prospects in baseball. And then Marco Luciano, to me, is those are two blue-chip prospects they could trade for Ohtani.
I saw there's this mock trade for him to the Giants. Hold on, let me see if I can find it real quick.
Oh, yeah, shit. And I'm just looking at other teams, kind of throwing some names out there. The Texas Rangers, they have a pretty good farm system still. They have Owen White. I'm sorry, Evan Carter, Jack Leader, who was picked second overall in 2021. So the Rangers do have some prospects. I don't think they'll be a destination for Ohtani. I'm still a big proponent of the Dodgers. Now, there have been rumors that they're not going to trade him to the Dodgers. I think that's stupid. I think you take the best deal no matter where it is. But that's just the Angels being the incompetent franchise that they have been. But I think the Dodgers are a great fit for him. Cincinnati, I mean, it'll be really interesting to see. Boston, I think, would be fun. The Yankees, they obviously have Jason Dominguez and Anthony Volpe. Those are some blue chip prospects that they could trade for Ohtani. But yeah, I mean, I haven't done too much research, but now kind of digging in and doing some research. There's a handful of teams that I think could be really fun for Ohtani, but I think at the end of the day, you want him to get traded to a team he's probably going to stay with long term. I mean, unless something just crazy happens and he gets traded to the Rays or the Diamondbacks, and I mean, those teams aren't going to re-sign him to the money he wants. But it'll be interesting to see. But did you pull up the Giants trade?
I'm not seeing the trade. It was a lot of farm players. Yeah. So, I mean, that's what the Angels should want. Shohei Ohtani mock trades. But, I mean, if there's a team, I don't see him going to the Yankees. I don't think that's even in discussion. I think the Mets, I think the Mets need to sell. I don't think that's an option that should even be taken. Because the Mets aren't contending this year. They're the last place team in their division. At least last time I checked, they were. Yeah, I can't find the straight, but I do have a mock trade for the Seattle Mariners.
All right, let's hear it.
Let me scroll down to the part of the article. Seattle mock trade. Angels receive right-handed pitcher Brian Wu, right-handed pitcher Emerson Hancock, first base and third baseman Tyler Locklear, outfielder Cade Marlowe, left-handed pitcher Juan Pinto for Shohei Ohtani.
I mean, those are a lot of prospects. I mean, I'm looking at their list. None of those guys. Emerson Hancock is their number 4 ranked prospect. So you're not really getting a blue chip prospect. I mean, unless what was his name? Wu, the starting pitcher that you mentioned.
Let me pull it back up
because I know he's
Brian Wu, their number 3 prospect.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I don't think that really is a needle mover for the Angels. But I mean, we'll see what happens. I think the Giants are a good destination as well. But
I think if you trade Shohei Ohtani, or the Angels aren't going to have a needle mover regardless. They are going to need people to develop. That's in my opinion, the point of trading Shohei Ohtani is that you develop for the future if you trade this guy. And if they trade Mike Trout, you develop even more for the future. And you suck for a couple of years and maybe get a couple first-round picks out of it, or number 1 overall picks out of it.
Yeah, that's something I haven't even considered with them trading Mike Trout, which, I mean, if you trade Ohtani and you just get a bunch of prospects, maybe Mike Trout is the next to go, which is crazy to think about. And I mean, that could be the next step for the for the Angels. But I do think like maybe they're going at it in the sense of maybe instead of getting 1 or 2 like blue chip potential future all-stars, we could get like 4 or 5 guys that maybe aren't going to ever be all-stars, but can be solid contributors, can be an everyday regular, or you can put them in the middle of a rotation and they can be solid. Maybe that's the way they're going to go at it, is just kind of replenishing their farm system and giving them some depth instead of just going after, like I said, 1 or 2 blue chip prospects that they think can be great. Maybe it's just about replenishing that farm system that is pretty barren right now. And maybe Mike Trout could be the next step in them really overhauling their farm system and putting their focus towards the future.
And I have nothing else for today. Obviously, I'm not drinking beer. I'm just drinking straight water right now. So if there's no rating, I mean, unless you would like me to drink or to review this water that I got from the tap.
10 out of water is a 10 out of 10, bro. Can't go better than water.
Stay hydrated. Stay high. Today is a stay hydrated podcast. There's no bubbly stomachs today. But next week, hopefully there's some more stuff going on. I believe trade deadlines start. What date does the trade deadline start?
July 31st. So I think next Thursday will be the 27th. So next Thursday we'll have a couple more days before the trade deadline. So there might be a move or 2 that's been made by the podcast next week. But yeah, we'll just be a couple days away from the trade deadline for next year.
Yeah, and then the week following, we're going to be talking about the trade deadline and everything that happens and all the festivities. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, John. I know you're a busy man, clipping heavyweights, and you're about to be on Motor City Metrics. For those of you that are watching right now, be sure to go over to the Motor City Metrics, check John out, check the guys out, give them a like, give them a follow, show them some love. But John, is there anything else you would like to say before we sign off?
Favorite trades, is that for next episode?
Oh, do you want to do that right now, or do you want to wait?
I say we save it.
I think you don't have the time right now. I think we need to wrap this up so you can get to your next destination.
Yeah, we'll save it for next. That's a little advertisement for next show. Favorite trades of all time.
Favorite trades of all time. Plus, I think this gives us a little bit of an ample opportunity to get some research done. I have a couple topics I do want to talk about next week as well. But be sure to follow me. You can see if you're watching live on Instagram at I am Parker Brown. You can follow John at jkloss29. You follow Beer Bat Podcast everywhere, Twitter, Instagram at Beer Bat Podcast for more. And you'll be seeing another podcast by me coming soon. Announcements coming first week of August. So be sure to stay tuned. Everybody take care. Let me end the broadcast.